Do you ever feel like you have a love-hate relationship with wealth or with rich people in general? The term filthy rich is an interesting term to me, and I heard it explained recently and expounded upon that topic, and I really got to thinking about it. The term filthy rich generally refers to someone who is extremely wealthy, right? But why do we call them filthy rich? Why do you call them, why wouldn't you call them clean rich? You know, the interesting thing about that is I think that we all wrestle with something inside of our mind. At least I know I do, and I think I'm not the only one. With, is being rich okay? Is it something that is going to be, basically you're not stepping on anyone morally, right? Well, it was probably, I would say probably about 6 to 7 years ago that my mindset shifted, somewhere around 30 years old. I'm 36 years old now. I came to a point in my life where it was a breaking point. The things I was doing needed to change, and I was willing to do anything it took to change it. Rewind the first 30 years of my life up until 30 years old. I really saw people with wealth, whether I'd like to admit it or not. In my earlier years, I would say I would admit it. But I saw people with wealth as that, as being filthy rich, not just rich. Why? Well, it was really kind of how I grew up. I looked at the people around me, and the people that had money, the people that were financially stable, I guess you could say. Not all of them, but the ones I paid attention to, they embodied, in one way or another, something of the sense of being filthy rich. Now, what do I mean by that? We've all seen those Ebenezer Scrooges, right? We've all seen that rich person who all they do is care about money. You see this in comic characters. It's interesting. You see that the villain typically is the rich person. The villain is the one who has money and wants to only hoard it for themselves. You see that in the, just Ebenezer Scrooge. I think it's a Christmas Carol. You see that throughout history, at least in modern history, what I'm seeing, society tends to paint a picture on the people that have wealth are doing something morally wrong. Now, there's a lot of things wrong with that. There's a lot of things that you could say they have right, but there's a lot of things wrong with that too. So the first 30 years of my life, I tried to... I always wanted wealth, right? I think just about everybody does. I mean, the lottery would not be the size it is today. We're approaching to the point with our lottery, like Powerball numbers, if you watch, that things are getting to the point to where like hitting $1 billion as the payout is like it's not a surprise anymore. It used to be that like the lottery's at like 300 million and everybody goes out and buys a ticket. Now it's like Oh, it's at 1 billion. Oh, that's really big. Okay, you move on without your day. Throughout your day. I remember not that long ago, probably 15 years ago or so, when the lottery hit some of these all-time records of like 300 million, I think, somewhere in that nature, and like everybody was going out and buying tickets. Because there's something inside of us that wants a life of ease. Yes, some of it, I guess you could say, would probably be our sin nature, the bad side of us. But in other ways, it's understandable. Nobody wants to drive a broke down car. Nobody wants to live in a broke down house that they can't pay their mortgage on. Everybody wants to be able to be rich, be wealthy, be able to afford a lifestyle that they want to live, right? So the interesting thing about that is, if we all have that kind of internal desire to be rich, to be wealthy, then why do we have this depiction of someone who's rich is not just rich, but they're filthy rich? Now, there's outliers, absolutely. There's outliers of the rich, and maybe you could say it's X percentage of the rich that are stingy. They're stingy, or they are only focused on themselves, or all they care about is money. That's fine. But, at least for me, in my mind, I viewed that as almost all, if not all. I remember in my mid-20s being able to think of one person that embodied someone who was wealthy, who was not filthy rich. They were someone who cared for other people. And I think that's sad. And there's a couple things to unpack in that. Number one, who are you hanging out with? What are the influences you're getting? Why is there only one person that you see that? And number two is it the way you see things? We put on a pair of glasses every morning, metaphorically speaking. We all see the world through this one viewpoint, and it's ours. And that pair of glasses is tinted in some way. It's either dark, it's shaded in some other light from our past experiences. So when I was probably, I would say, teenage years and earlier, early teens and earlier, I hated rich people. I really did. Internally, I told myself this. Like, it wasn't even something that, like, I didn't know and it was just subconscious. It was 100%, I knew it. I did not like rich people. Well, what happened with that? How did that develop my life? That developed my life into doing things that I thought were just going to be enough. I wanted to do this career because I could work with my hands. I could do something that I felt like I enjoyed. I'm very much like a hands-on learner. I think mechanically. I have a hard time thinking in abstract thought. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to go into this career because I'm not going to be rich. Nobody's going to look down on me like I look down on other people that have wealth. But yet, I can have just enough. Went into, I would say, my early 20s with that thought process. Started a family when I was, I think, somewhere around 22. Well, life comes around and it's like, it's kind of hard to pay the bills. It's kind of hard to fulfill some of these obligations. So what do? You start looking around to, let's make some more money. You're not thinking, let's become rich, but you're thinking, let's make some more money, right? So I remember working for a print shop, and very, very mechanically minded type of job. But you're going to cap out at a certain level. You're never going to work to the point to where it's like the sky's the limit. Not at all, right? But I thought I can work and have just enough. Well, that didn't really pan out. Gets to the point to where it's like, okay, we're not able to pay the bills. So what do? Okay, I'll fall back on my last career. I'll fall back on lawn care. I'll start a lawn care company on the side. So I started a lawn care company on the side. And I did that for a number of years. Worked at the print shop. Worked on the lawn care company. It didn't succeed. Spoiler alert. Why? Is lawn care in the city, was living in Kansas City at the time, lawn care in Kansas City, is that something that people don't want? No, right? Plenty of people out there that want their lawn cut. There's plenty of people out there who are willing to pay for their lawn to be cut. So why didn't it succeed? Well, there's a number of different reasons. I could go back and I could cite all these different things I did wrong: marketing, sales, management, all these different things, right? But ultimately, I know why it failed. Because up until the point that I was about 30 years old, I had this mindset that rich people were not just rich, they were filthy rich. I didn't want to be that. Everything came crashing down in my life. It just crumbled when I was about 30 years old, monetarily speaking. And so I started listening to some different voices than I ever had. The voices before told me that you should just make enough and be satisfied, right? There's nothing wrong with being satisfied. We should all be satisfied in the places that God puts us. But what I'm talking about is not just being satisfied, but being to the point that you do not want to work any harder because you're afraid of being judged. You're afraid that people are going to look down on you because you're too wealthy. That thought process was subconscious. You know, when I was in my teen years, for instance, when I was in my teen years, the thought process, or in early teens, kid, the thought process of not wanting to be rich, like I could admit that to myself. But once I got into my mid-20s, what happened? That thought process of being rich and not wanting to be rich became so ingrained in me that I didn't have to think about it anymore. It was subconscious. So when you try to operate a business, when you try to work at your job, subconsciously, your subconscious is shutting things down. And it's making it to where, well, when I hand out these flyers for my lawn care company, I want to hand out just enough. I think I've got enough clients because this is just enough. I think I've done enough here because this is just enough. You don't realize it. You don't realize that the thought processes that you allow to happen can play out through your subconscious, and the little things that you let go will turn into big things down the road. When I sat there and when I look back at that, all the things that I did not or did do, a lot of them in why things didn't work out in my mid-20s, all of my 20s, is because of the way I viewed wealth. I viewed wealth as something that was wrong, something that was inherently evil, until my mindset changed. And when I started looking at people that had wealth of a different mindset, a mindset, mind you, that is not necessarily selfish driven, not necessarily saying I want to create these things for myself, because that is wrong, right? You shouldn't want to just do it all for you, but you should want to do it for others. You should want to be able to make this business for people to that you can give to charity. You know, you do want to do this business so that I can provide for my family better. You want to look at things as the sky's the limit, and instead of looking at things of like, just enough. I used to have this thought process that $50,000 a year was sweet spot. And I laugh about it now because back in the 90s, I remember, I heard when I was a kid of people having $50,000 a year, and I thought, okay, I think that would be a good number for me, $50,000 a year. And so I always had that in my mind. I mean, go through the 20s, my 20s, enter into my 30s, and it's like $50,000 a year. It's just that number. It is the year 2023, and I still kind of, like, subconsciously, I still have that number in my mind. It's funny to me. I looked up what $50,000 a year was worth in 1990 compared to 2023 we live in now. You know what it's worth? $50,000 a year is worth $130,000 buying power now. That's how much inflation went up. So if you have this mindset of $50,000 a year, that's just enough. We want to be thankful for what God gave us, which you do. But you want to say, I'm okay right here. I'm okay right here because I don't want to be filthy rich. What happens in 30 years? 30 years later, fast forward 30 years later, $50,000 a year is worth like what? 20? 25? I'd have to look that up. Can you provide for a family 30 years later on $20,000 or $25,000 a year? I can't. Not without pulling in things like welfare and maybe having your house completely paid off and pulling some strings. In today's day and age, supporting a family, you've got like supporting a family of 5 or 6, you've got to be in the range of $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year just to be like breaking even, you know, putting a little bit away for retirement, putting a little bit away for savings, and like just breaking that even mark. So the question lies, do you want to just break even? You got to think about that for yourself. Now, some would say, yes, we just want to be just enough. So the question I would ask you now, and it's the question I asked myself around the time that I was about 31 years old, was, if I'm breaking even, if I'm just putting a little bit away from retirement, a little bit of savings, we're paying the mortgage, kids are fed, all the responsibilities are taken care of. We've got enough money to save up for one vacation, small vacation a year. If you're doing all those things and you're checking off all those boxes, are you able to help others? Are you able to go in, if somebody were to approach you and they have $30,000 in medical bills, this is a life or death situation, could you drop $30,000 in their lap and say, save this person in your life's life? Or would you step back and say, can't, because all I've been doing is I've been living in the mindset of having just enough, because people being filthy rich is inherently evil, or being rich is inherently evil. That's the mindset that got changed when I was 30 years old. I looked at that and I started realizing and started thinking, there's a gentleman, I'll give you a quick synopsis. There's a gentleman in my wife and I's life that has been wealthy, that is wealthy, that has constantly been there, constantly looked after us in a mentorship way and helped us out financially. Could I have done the same things to someone else that he did for us? Right? Could I sit there and make someone's life completely go in a different direction, a good direction, with what I was doing, just living in a just enough mindset? And I couldn't say I did. I could. And I couldn't. And once I started thinking about that, and I started realizing, you know what? I think that this just enough mindset needs to change. It needs to change because I need to be able to have a mindset of working, not just working, but using the resources. Not just working super hard and being the hardest worker, because I was already trying to do that. But I was just trying to work really hard at things that weren't getting me anywhere. But I want to use the resources that I have. You know, I live in America, okay? I have so many resources around me. It's not even funny. Not everybody has the resources that I have. But other people in other countries have resources that I don't have. So everybody's dealt these different hand of cards. And I came to the realization that I want to start using my mind to change the way I provide for my family. I want to start stop thinking about like, oh, these are the only things that I know how to do, work with my hands. I want to say, okay, let me start working with my mind too. And I wanted to say, let's see where we can take this. I don't know where the end is. You know, like I've said before, God could call me off of this world tomorrow. He could call you off of this world tomorrow. So saying that I'm going to be a billionaire someday is, it's kind of frivolous. But there's a parable of the man in the Bible, a master who gave his servants talents. And he gave the 3 servants different amounts of talents. Talents were a measurement, a weight of something, and it was a weight of gold in that parable. And that parable states that he gave one servant a certain amount. It was like 1 talent. One servant 2 or 3 talents, and another servant 2 or 3 talents. I don't remember the exact number. But he left, and when he came back, the one servant buried his talent. And the second servant invested his talent. And the third servant invested his talents. And the third servant doubled his, I believe. And the second servant doubled his. And the first servant gave that 1 talent that the master gave back. And the master said to the servant that you were foolish for not taking the talent and at least putting it in the bank and creating some income for me. And the other ones, he says, because you have been faithful with much, I will entrust you with much. I used to think of that verse, and it can be applied in multiple different ways, but I used to think of that verse as just a verse applied to our faith as Christians, and say that we need to grow as Christians. But I don't think it just applies to that. I mean, why would Jesus give a parable about wealth if it only applies to our faith? I think that it can be applied to everything in general he gives us. So this is the hand that I'm dealt. Are you taking this thing that you have here, and are you investing it? So I've been dropped off inside the United States of America. Am I taking the things around me and I'm saying, I'm going to do the best that I can to my ability, not just with my hands, but with my mind, with my body, with my spirit, with my soul, like everything that I have to my ability to do the best that I can. That includes your wealth. That includes your money. If you have this mindset of just having enough, $50,000 is a good number, I'm going to stick with that, and everybody else who's rich is filthy rich. Because I don't want to be lumped into that Ebenezer Scrooge mindset. Don't get me wrong, that Ebenezer Scrooge mindset is a real thing. You know, the Bible says that it's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than a camel to go through the eye of the needle. And that's an interesting thing right there, because there was a archway, I believe, just outside of Jerusalem, and it was a hole in a wall, essentially. It was a really low wall. And the camel, you had to unpack everything off the camel's back. And the camel literally, I mean, the picture of it is amazing. The camel had to get down on its knees and basically belly crawl through this hole. And that's the picture of being wealthy. In order to be righteous and be wealthy, you have to get on your knees before God and be humble. So that picture of the filthy rich person is a real thing. Absolutely. But is it all of them? No, it's not. And does it need to be you? No. Why does it need to be you? If you are wealthy, why does that automatically mean that now you are someone you're not? If someone were to give you a winning lottery ticket and say, here you go, you just won the $1 billion lottery ticket, does that automatically mean that now I'm an Ebenezer Scrooge and I'm filthy rich and I am someone I'm not? No, it doesn't. What does it mean? It means that everything that you do in your life right now is amplified. You're under a magnifying glass now. So if you're a good steward with your money today, that means that $1 billion is going to go somewhere. If you're a bad student with your money today, unless you change it, if you do the exact same thing of what you're doing today, then that $1 billion is going to be gone in an instant. If you steal from others, like, not physically, but if you say, hey, I want to swindle a little bit from that one, pull a little bit from that deal, pull a little bit from there, what's that going to do? You're going to be the filthy rich person. You're going to be the person that is the Ebenezer Scrooge, that is the top of your circle of friends, that makes all this money, that screws everybody over. Money does not necessarily change people. It just amplifies who they are. That needs to change. Once I changed that in my head, everything changed for me. That's a quote from Jim Rohn, who I started listening to when I was about 30 years old. And he was right. Once your mindset changes, everything will change for you. And it's the same for you. That began my journey of that week. I went from hating rich people to walking into the office of my boss and saying, I want to be a sales rep. That was the mindset shift. And it was just the same thing as I was having a conversation with a friend of mine this morning. And we were talking about how a lot of people think, and they hear this term, mindset. You know, your mindset needs to be different. Your mindset needs to be different, which is true. But they hear this term, and I thought the same thing. Used to. I don't anymore. But I used to think that I can change my mind tomorrow. No. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. If you're fat and you're out of shape and you walk into the gym, what is that? Does that mean you're immediately buff and you got a six-pack? No. It means that's the start of the change. You sat there and you said, okay, today I'm going to change things. But it takes years. It can. And depending upon how hard you work at it, just like working out in the gym, it can work. It can come to you quickly, or it can take a long time. And I'll tell you, at least for my journey, myself, I am 36 years old now. It's been a 6-year process, and that initial shift of looking at people as being filthy rich changed fairly quickly. Outwardly. But internally, subconsciously, that's been a cycle. It's been something I've had to work through. I've ebbed and I'd flowed. I get into those rhythms of like, we got enough, until you struggle. And then it's like, wait a minute, why am I struggling? I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this old mindset again. I got to get into this mindset of working and using as many resources as I can. I got to put resources away. And it's been a little while in that mode, and things are starting to change. I'm seeing it's a chain reaction. You're seeing the chain reaction like push on to the next one, and it's a domino effect. And I got a long way to go. I'm not gonna lie. I have not arrived by any means. 36 years old. It took me to about 30 years old to change that mindset. It's going to be a while before I'm there. But each level, you have to push to the next level. Each level, you say, okay, we're here. We're able to take care of all these different scenarios. Now, how do we move on to the next level? And then your mindset has to change again. And your mindset has to change again. You know, when you're working with your hands, if you're a mechanic, you're whatever. And there's nothing dogging against people that work with their hands. But it's a hard living. It's something that is generally you cap out. And I don't look down on anybody that works with their hands by any means. Don't get me wrong. I love working with my hands. I'll be out splitting wood for the rest of the day today, and I thoroughly enjoy it. But splitting wood for a living is a hard living. But when you go from doing something like that, like working with your hands, to now I'm a sales rep, that's a big mindset shift. Well, what if you want to move on from there? What if you want to own your own business? Well, what happens? That's a mindset shift again. And so on and so forth. My only thing to wrap this up, I would like to say, is it does not matter where you end up in life. If that is $50,000 and you worked as hard as you could and you used as many resources as you could and you did everything you could, then that's where God wants you. If that's $20,000 a year, if that's having $2 in the savings account, if that's having $100 million in the savings account, doesn't matter where you're at in life, as long as you did everything in your power, you used all the resources in your power to do everything you could to help others around you and fulfill the purpose of why you're here, to glorify God. Thanks for watching, guys. My name is Noah Gordon. We'll see you next time.